Sir, I'm not gonna tell you again. Turn around and leave the premises. Now. The man's voice cracked like a whip, sharp and aggressive, his chest puffed out like he was guarding the president. His partner stepped in, squaring up to me like I was some kind of threat. All I did was try to walk through the front gate, my dress uniform ironed, my medals polished, my invitation in hand. But these two guards didn't care. They didn't see a father trying to attend his only son's graduation. They saw a black man in a military uniform and assumed I didn't belong. And before I could even speak, one of them shoved me, hard, right in the chest. I didn't stumble. I didn't yell. I just looked him in the eye and said, "You really don't want to do that." But that only fired them up more. "Is that a threat?" the shorter one barked, his hand twitching toward his belt. "You threatening me now, huh? Because I will call the cops real quick. You think that uniform gives you a free pass?" And before I could even respond, he grabbed my wrist. He made a mistake. I twisted my arm free and stepped back, not to fight, but to breathe. I've faced enemies on foreign soil. I've led men into battle. I've pulled bleeding soldiers out of burning wreckage. But nothing makes your blood boil like being humiliated on home soil, on your son's big day, by men who couldn't even pass basic training. "Don't touch me," I said, low and clear. "Oh, he's resisting now," the taller one sneered, pulling out his radio. "We got a situation at the front gate. We need backup. Got a hostile individual here, possibly armed." I took a step forward. "I'm not hostile. I'm a 4-star general in the United States Army. My name is Marcus Cole. That's my son graduating today. I have an invitation. I submitted my credentials 3 weeks ago." The short one snorted. "You? A general?" "Yeah, right. What did you do, buy that uniform off eBay?" And then, he laughed. That did it. He laughed in my face like I was a joke. Like my 29 years of service meant nothing. Like the friends I buried, the limbs I watched torn from bodies, the nights I slept in foxholes, the wounds I carried, were all just a game to him. I stepped into his space. "Son, you got 2 seconds to back up before you regret everything you just said." He puffed up like a rooster, but I could see it in his eyes. He didn't expect me to push back. He thought I'd cower. Maybe that's what he was used to. Maybe that's what they expected. And that's when the crowd started noticing. A couple of parents turned their heads. A group of students standing near the auditorium stairs whispered. A mother with a stroller pulled her child away like I was about to erupt. It didn't matter that I had 4 silver stars pinned to my chest. All they saw was a black man being aggressive. One of the guards lunged again. This time I grabbed his wrist, twisted, and dropped him to his knees. No punches. No violence. Just pressure. Just control. But the other one panicked and reached for something behind his back. And that's when the shouting began. "Don't move." Another voice. Deeper. Stronger. Commanding. 6 men in navy blue uniforms appeared out of nowhere, their presence slicing through the chaos like a blade. They weren't just any men. They were warriors. SEALs. My SEALs. The one in front, Commander Ortiz, stepped forward with fire in his eyes. "Take your hands off him, unless you want the Navy to teach you a lesson in humility." The guards froze. They didn't know what hit them. The man they tried to throw out was being protected by warriors who looked like they'd been through hell and back, and were ready to return there on his command. I released the guard's wrist and stepped back. "You've made a huge mistake," Ortiz said, eyes locked on the 2 men still trying to figure out if this was real life or a nightmare. "That man isn't just a general. He's the reason I'm alive. He pulled me out of an ambush in Kandahar. Carried me 3 miles on a shattered leg. You don't touch that man. You don't even breathe in his direction without respect." The crowd had gone dead silent. Even the birds stopped chirping. Parents pulled out phones. Students looked from me to the guards like they'd just witnessed something holy. The guards shrank. Their bravado evaporated. Now they just looked scared. And that's when the narrator in me kicks in. Funny how quick people change when they realize who you are. But that's the problem, isn't it? They shouldn't have to know who you are to treat you with dignity. You shouldn't have to pull rank or wear medals to be allowed in the door. My uniform didn't make me a father. My title didn't give me a right to be proud. I was just a man trying to see his son walk across that stage. And they tried to tear that moment away from me like it was theirs to own. But this wasn't over. Because the principal hadn't shown his face yet. Because Jaden, my son, was still standing backstage, waiting for a ceremony that was about to get a whole lot more complicated. And because the truth? The truth hadn't even started unraveling yet. You think this was bad? Just wait. This was only the beginning. This was the moment the curtain lifted. And what came next would shake that whole school to its core. People like to talk about freedom, about respect, about honor. But what they don't talk about is what it costs to wear those values on your chest. They don't tell you how many nights you'll sleep on the dirt wondering if your family is safe without you. They don't tell you about the birthdays you'll miss, the anniversaries forgotten, the soccer games you'll never attend. They don't tell you that the same country you fight for might look at you sideways the second you take off the camouflage and walk through a civilian door as a black man. My name is General Marcus Cole. 29 years of service. 4 tours overseas. 3 Purple Hearts. A chest full of ribbons. And 1 son, Jaden, who I haven't seen smile like he used to since he was 13 years old. Not since his mother passed away. That boy lost more than a mom that day. He lost his compass. And I lost my anchor. After Kimberly died, I buried myself in the military. I thought discipline and distance would keep the pain at bay. I told myself I was providing for him. That it was enough. But the truth? I was scared. I didn't know how to raise a boy alone. I didn't know how to be strong without a battlefield. So I poured everything into my work, and I left him behind in the quiet. But Jaden, he never let go. He sent me letters when he was a kid. Drew pictures of fighter jets and wrote, "I want to be just like you, Dad." Even when I forgot to call. Even when I missed his piano recitals and science fairs. That boy held on. He was the reason I changed. 2 years ago, after a near-death ambush in Kabul, I sat in a hospital bed with a collapsed lung and a shattered femur. I remember staring at the ceiling thinking, if I die right here, the only thing my son will inherit is silence. So I made a decision. I filed my retirement. I came home. I started showing up. It wasn't easy. Jaden was 16 by then. Quiet. Reserved. Suspicious of every word I said. And I didn't blame him. I had to earn back something I'd given up, his trust. But I did it. I showed up every morning to drive him to school. I helped him with college essays. I sat in the front row when he gave his speech as class president. And slowly, he opened back up. He's brilliant, you know. Top of his class. Wants to study aerospace engineering. Got into Stanford on a full ride. But more than that, he's kind. He volunteers at shelters. Tutors underclassmen in math. Plays the piano like it speaks a language only he understands. That kid, he's everything I wanted to be but never had the chance to. And today was supposed to be the day I stood next to him and told the world, this is my son. But people like those guards, those 2 men who shoved me, humiliated me, they don't see a proud father. They see a threat. They see skin first. Rank second. If at all. You want to know why it happened? Because 3 weeks ago, when I sent in my RSVP to the private military prep academy Jaden attended, someone flagged my name. A certain board member, Darren Holbrook, retired colonel, and one of the old boys, recognized me from years back. He and I had a history. One that didn't end well. He was my superior back in '08. We butted heads. I filed a complaint after he ignored intel that got 5 good men killed. He never forgave me for that. Said I ruined his career. Said men like me didn't know how to follow orders. He ended up on the board of Jaden's school last year. And when he saw my name on that guest list, he saw an opportunity. He couldn't deny my entrance outright. That would have made waves. But he could give the security team quiet instructions. If General Cole shows up, treat him like any other guest. No special treatment. Translation, don't let him through. And he didn't stop there. He made sure Jaden didn't get to list me in the official family introductions. Made sure my name wasn't read during the slideshow of honored guests. He erased me from the program, on purpose. Why? Because punishing me wasn't enough. He wanted my son to feel it too. See, people like Darren? They wear patriotism like a mask. But behind closed doors, they guard a twisted version of America. One where privilege is inherited, and respect is rationed. One where they clap for veterans in commercials, but look the other way when those same men get profiled on their front steps. Jaden didn't know any of this. I didn't tell him. He was nervous enough already. This day was about him. But now? After that humiliating mess at the front gate, he's going to find out everything. Because that man just made this personal. And remember those SEALs who stepped in? They weren't just a coincidence. They were there for Jaden too. 3 of them flew in from California. 1 came from DC. They all served under me. Men I saved. Men who owe me nothing, but showed up anyway. Because when someone tries to erase your name, they remind the world exactly who you are. But Holbrook wasn't done. I found out later he had a whole plan. A speech prepared. A backhanded line about setting standards and defending our traditions. He was going to humiliate me publicly. Turn the ceremony into his own little revenge parade. But one thing he didn't count on? Jaden. Because my son had his own speech prepared. And what he was about to say would turn that gymnasium upside down. That gym was packed. Parents beaming, cameras flashing, staff in their pressed uniforms, smug as ever. But I didn't see any of that. All I could focus on was the icy stare of Darren Holbrook, seated front and center, acting like he still ran the battlefield, when all he had left was a clipboard and a fake smile. But his eyes, they burned with something colder than rivalry. Resentment. Because the man who once stood beneath him now stood above, not just in rank, but in dignity. And that, he couldn't take. What he could take, though, was reputation. And he'd been trying to do just that for months. What I didn't know, what I would find out only after that chaotic scene at the front gate, was that this moment had been months in the making. Holbrook had already been spreading quiet rumors around the board. That I was too aggressive. That my son was entitled, ungrateful, riding on my rank. He'd been planting seeds, making it seem like Jaden didn't earn his place. Like I was using my pull to push him ahead. He'd even gone so far as to suggest that Jaden's Stanford admission should be reconsidered due to academic irregularities. He wanted to stain both our legacies. But why? Because Holbrook didn't lose a career. He lost control. And when men like him lose control, they don't reflect. They retaliate. Let me take you back to 2008. We were stationed in Mosul. Tensions high, civilians on edge. I was a lieutenant colonel back then, under Holbrook's direct command. He was cocky. Liked to bark orders from air-conditioned bunkers while the rest of us hit the dirt. One night, we intercepted intel about a possible ambush near a local market. I wanted to delay movement. Confirm intel. Triple-check the routes. Holbrook refused. Said hesitation was cowardice. Ordered us in. We lost 5 men. One of them was my best friend, Captain Aaron Briggs. Left behind a wife and twin girls. I filed an official complaint. Didn't care that it would make waves. Didn't care that Holbrook threatened to end my career. I cared about the truth. I cared about honor, not hierarchy. That complaint went nowhere. Buried under red tape. But it haunted Holbrook. I went on to get promoted. Decorated. Respected. He got reassigned. Quietly retired. And now here he was. With one last move to make. The conspiracy didn't stop with rumors. I would later learn he contacted a member of the graduation planning committee directly, suggesting my name be left off the family registry because I posed a security risk. A security risk, me, a 4-star general who'd cleared more buildings in Kandahar than that whole panel had stepped foot in. He also instructed the guards personally. Told them I was known for confrontations. That they should be ready to escort me away if needed. All behind closed doors. You see the pattern? He wasn't trying to protect anyone. He was building a trap. One that would paint me as hostile if I dared fight back. And when I did, when I pushed past those guards and demanded to see my son, he finally got what he wanted, an outburst. Cameras turned. Whispers started. Parents clutching their pearls, thinking I was some deranged man off the street. But you know what the biggest twist was? It wasn't Holbrook's petty scheme. It was the silence of the people around him. Because even though several staff members knew exactly who I was, even though some of them had worked with me on veteran initiatives or waved flags at parades in my honor, not one of them stood up. Not one of them said, "Hey, that's General Cole. Let him in." Because power protects power. And if you're not part of that inner circle, if you threaten to challenge it, then you're expendable. Even if you've served, bled, sacrificed. Especially if you're black. Now here's where it gets even more twisted. Jaden had prepared a speech. But not just any speech. He was selected as the valedictorian. Something he earned entirely on his own merit. And yet Holbrook tried to cancel that, too. He approached the headmaster 2 nights before the ceremony. Claimed Jaden's speech was too political. Said it might cause division because it mentioned his mom's passing and how much he admired his dad's service. They wanted him to cut it down. Remove references to me. Make it more neutral. They tried to erase his story, just like they tried to erase mine. But Jaden didn't back down. He didn't tell me any of this until later. Said he didn't want to ruin my day. Instead, he quietly rehearsed a version they approved, then rewrote a brand new speech in secret. He wasn't just going to mention me. He was going to call them out. And he told his closest friends, those SEALs I trained, exactly what he planned to do. That's why they came. Not just to support, but to protect. They saw the setup coming. They knew Holbrook wouldn't stop until he humiliated us both. So those 6 men who'd fought in the harshest deserts, who'd saved lives under fire, they stood by that stage like silent guardians, daring anyone to stop him. Because you don't betray a man who carried you through hell, and you don't touch his son without consequences. The conspiracy had layers. Manipulated records. Hidden agendas. And the worst part? Some of the very people who benefited from my work, who smiled in my face during fundraisers or wrote checks to veteran programs, they were complicit. They stayed quiet because it was convenient. Because their comfort mattered more than my dignity. And Jaden? He was about to walk up to that podium, knowing that every eye would be watching, knowing that he might be cut off, knowing that one wrong word could cost him everything he'd worked for. But he was his father's son. And he wasn't going to run. Because when the system tries to erase your name, your story, your blood, you don't beg to be seen. You dare them to look away. The gymnasium had gone quiet, but not in a good way. It was the kind of quiet that sits heavy in your chest. The kind that comes right before something explodes. You could feel the tension crawling up your spine like static. Half the audience didn't even know what was going on. The other half? Pretending they didn't. Me? I was standing at the back wall, fists still clenched, jaw tight, my uniform straight, shoulders high, but my heart, my damn heart, it was thundering like a war drum. Because my son, Jaden, was walking toward that stage. And I knew exactly what they were about to do to him. He stepped up, nervous, but proud. The microphone was already set. The faculty had seated themselves like judges at some tribunal. And in the corner, Holbrook stood, arms folded, smug as ever, like this was all part of his final act. But then, he did it. That coward raised a hand and whispered something to the dean sitting closest to the sound booth. The audio tech nodded. And I knew. They were going to cut his mic, cut him off. Silence my son in front of 1,000 people just like they tried to silence me. I moved fast, 3 steps forward, but before I could make it to the aisle, I felt 2 hands land on my chest again. Same guards. Sir, you need to remain where you are, one of them hissed, tone stiff and official. This is a private school event. I looked down at their hands, then looked up. You do not touch me, I said through clenched teeth. I outrank everyone in this building. But they didn't move. And that was when I lost it. You think I'm gonna sit back and let you do to him what you did to me? I shouted, loud enough for everyone around us to hear. You think you can rewrite who we are? Not today. The crowd started murmuring. Phones came up. Parents turned. Suddenly, I wasn't just a disruption. I was a scene. Exactly what Holbrook wanted. And in the middle of that pressure, while I was about to explode, my son stood there, calm. Still. Mic in hand. And he started speaking. Even with the system trying to mute him. Even with the tech guy nervously eyeing the kill switch. Even with his voice shaking. He spoke. My name is Jaden Cole, he said clearly, slowly, every syllable like a punch through smoke, and I stand here not just as a graduate, but as the son of a man who taught me what integrity looks like when the whole world tries to break you. I held my breath. He continued. He didn't buy me my place here. He didn't make phone calls or pull rank. I studied for every exam. Earned every grade. And I faced every whisper about not belonging with my head high. Holbrook shifted. His fingers drummed against his wrist. But today, Jaden said, I almost didn't get to speak at all. Not because I didn't earn this podium, but because some people would rather protect power than honor. The entire room gasped. Holbrook stood upright. That's when it happened. The mic cut. Just silence. Jaden froze. His lips still moving, but no sound. And in that half second of injustice, the SEALs stepped forward. All 6 of them. Not in a rush. Not angry. Just present. Deliberate. They moved through the crowd in formation. Quiet. Commanding. The entire room parted like the Red Sea. These weren't just men in suits. These were warriors. Decorated. Respected. Trained to detect threats and eliminate them without saying a word. And their message was loud, even in silence. Touch this boy again, and we won't be so polite next time. They walked right up to the stage and stood behind Jaden, shoulder to shoulder. And then, one of them pulled a small wireless mic from his pocket, clipped it to Jaden's collar, and tapped his phone. Static. Then sound. Loud. Clear. Defiant. And my son, picked up exactly where he left off. You can try to silence me, he said, voice now amplified across the entire gym, but you can't silence the truth. Thunderous silence followed. You could feel the crowd shifting. Parents who had stayed seated before now began nodding. A few even stood. Clapped once. Then twice. Then the whole back row was on their feet. It wasn't a roar, not yet, but it was movement. And Holbrook? He panicked. He whispered again. This time to the dean. Then he moved toward the stage. But the SEALs didn't let him pass. They didn't lay a hand on him, just stood there. Like statues. Like honor itself. And he froze. Right there. In front of everybody. That was his breaking point. But it wasn't mine. Mine came when Jaden's voice cracked, right at the end. When I was 8, he said, my mom passed away. My dad tucked me into bed that night and said, no matter how dark the world gets, remember who you are. And I have. Every step of the way. He paused, looked out over the crowd, eyes locking with mine. Today, I honor her. And him. Because no lie, no system, no entitled man in a suit will ever be stronger than a father's truth. And I broke. Not with tears. But with pride so heavy, it almost dropped me to my knees. Because that was the moment he stopped being a boy. That was the moment they stopped controlling the story. And that was the moment the world finally listened. Just when you think the fight's over, the ground beneath your feet shifts. The room was still buzzing from Jaden's words echoing loud and clear, from the SEAL's silent but unmistakable support, from the stunned faces of everyone watching the entitled bully Holbrook frozen in place. But then, out of nowhere, the school principal, who had been nowhere to be seen, stepped up to the podium. Calm, composed, but carrying a weight behind his eyes. "I'm sorry for the disruption," he began, voice steady but firm, "and I understand why tensions are high." He paused, scanning the crowd. "But there's something everyone here needs to know, something that changes everything." Whispers broke out, but the crowd fell silent again, waiting. "The guards who confronted General Cole earlier," he said carefully, "were not acting on my orders. In fact, the school's administration had no prior knowledge of any attempt to remove him or his son from today's event." The room held its breath. "What I'm about to share with you," the principal continued, "has been a secret until now. A secret that involves people much higher up than anyone in this room." Then, with a sharp nod toward the security detail, the principal revealed a confidential email thread. Emails between the school's head of security and a private contractor hired by an influential local politician who had personal grievances with General Cole. A politician who stood to gain from the general's public humiliation. Those guards, the principal said, were hired specifically to intimidate the general and his family. To send a message that people like them don't belong here. But they underestimated the strength of this family and the power of truth. Shock rippled through the crowd. Parents gasped. Students whispered. Phones quickly came out to capture the revelation. Holbrook's face drained of color. Suddenly, everything changed. The antagonist was no longer just a bullying school official, he was part of a larger, more dangerous conspiracy. But the biggest twist came next. As the principal finished, one of the 6 SEALs stepped forward. Calm and measured, his voice carried the weight of years spent in the shadows. "General Cole isn't just a respected military leader," he said quietly, "he's also been working undercover to expose corruption at the highest levels. What happened here today was no accident." The audience was stunned. This graduation was targeted because it was one of the few public events where the general's family would be vulnerable, the SEAL continued. "We've been watching this for months." Then, in a moment that made the crowd collectively hold its breath, the SEAL pulled out a dossier. Photographs, documents, and recordings that revealed the politician's criminal activities, hidden bribery, and plans to rig local elections. The betrayal went deeper than anyone imagined. And now the stakes were higher than ever. Because this wasn't just about a graduation speech or a father and son's dignity. This was a battle for justice, a fight against a corrupt system that wanted to silence anyone who dared to stand up. And just like that, the underdog was no longer alone. New allies emerged. Old enemies showed their true colors. The fight had only just begun. The room was no longer just a school gym. It was a battlefield. And the next move? It would decide everything. The air was thick with tension, every eye fixed on the growing storm about to break loose. The 6 SEALs flanked General Cole like silent guardians, their presence alone sending a clear message: this fight was far from over, and the general's family was not to be trifled with. The crowd buzzed with nervous energy, whispers turning into murmurs of support. The underdog was finally finding his strength, no longer the man pushed around but a warrior ready to face the consequences of years of injustice. The politician, once hidden behind layers of influence and power, was now exposed, his name splashed across screens and whispered in halls of power. But instead of backing down, he doubled down, issuing threats and mobilizing allies to discredit General Cole. He sent his lawyers to file lawsuits, tried to spin the narrative on social media, and used every trick in the book to turn public opinion. The school administration, caught in the crossfire, began distancing themselves, fearing the fallout. But the general wasn't alone. His loyal friends, including Jaden's closest supporters, rallied around him, refusing to let the truth be buried. In private, the general faced moments of doubt. His wife, exhausted but unbreakable, reminded him of their son's dream and why this fight mattered, not just for them but for every person who had ever been silenced. Emotional confrontations erupted between friends and foes alike. Even the former bully, Holbrook, started to crack under pressure, his facade beginning to crumble. A once-reformed mentor figure stepped forward to guide the general, helping him navigate the legal maze and media storm, reminding him that strength wasn't just physical, it was about resilience, wisdom, and heart. As public support grew, so did the antagonist's desperation. Attempts to intimidate and isolate the general became more aggressive. But every attack only fueled his resolve. This was his breaking point, the moment when fear turned into unyielding courage. The reckoning wasn't just about punishment, it was about justice, truth, and the hope that even the smallest voice can shake the pillars of corruption. The battle lines were drawn clearly now, the underdog was rising, and the corrupt powers would soon face the consequences they deserved. The day had finally arrived, the moment every heart in that crowded auditorium was holding its breath for. The general stood tall, surrounded by the 6 SEALs who had become his unyielding shield. Across the room, the corrupt politicians' allies gathered, their faces masks of desperation and fury, knowing their empire of lies was about to collapse. This wasn't just a graduation ceremony anymore, it was the stage for a final reckoning that would decide not only the fate of a family but the soul of a community. Voices rose, accusations flew, and the truth spilled like wildfire. The general's words cut through the tension with razor-sharp clarity, exposing every deceit, every betrayal that had been buried under layers of corruption. The politicians' smirks vanished as witness after witness stepped forward, backing the general's claims with undeniable evidence. The loyal friends, once silent supporters, now spoke out with fierce conviction, their testimonies dismantling the antagonist's carefully constructed lies. Holbrook, the former bully, shocked everyone by publicly admitting his role in the intimidation and expressing regret, a raw moment of redemption that shook the room. The authority figures who had turned a blind eye were forced to confront their complicity, some breaking down under the weight of their guilt. Social media exploded as videos of the confrontation went viral, the public rallying behind the general and his family. The power tripper's empire crumbled piece by piece, his legal threats exposed as empty bluffs. Justice was served with a thunderous finality, policies were changed, corrupt officials removed, and the school vowed to rebuild on a foundation of respect and inclusion. The general, once cast as an outcast, was hailed as a hero who stood firm against injustice. The crowd erupted, not just in celebration of a graduation, but in triumph of truth, courage, and resilience. As the dust settled, the moral was clear: no amount of power or privilege can silence the voice of integrity. The underdog's victory was a beacon for everyone who had ever been underestimated or oppressed, proving that standing up for what's right always changes the game. Now, listen closely, because this is where the story truly settles into your heart. What happened that day wasn't just about a graduation or a battle between 2 men. It was about standing up when the world tries to push you down, about the courage to face injustice no matter how powerful the opposition seems. General Cole and his family reminded us all that dignity and honor aren't given, they are claimed, fought for, and defended fiercely. The consequences of that explosive confrontation echoed far beyond that room. The corrupt politician faced investigations, his career destroyed, and his influence wiped away. The school system, once riddled with silence and fear, began a long process of healing and reform. The people who doubted the general, who tried to push him and his family out, were forced to acknowledge their mistakes. Even those who once looked the other way found themselves questioning the systems they supported. The ripple effect was undeniable. For General Cole's son, Jaden, the graduation became more than a ceremony, it was a symbol of triumph over hate and prejudice. It was a lesson that no matter the obstacles, family and integrity will always stand stronger. The 6 SEALs, quiet warriors behind the scenes, became legends not just for their strength but for their loyalty and belief in justice. Friends who had stood by the general grew into heroes of their own, proving that standing together is the key to overcoming even the darkest moments. And what about you? This story isn't just theirs, it's yours too. Life will throw challenges at you. Sometimes, those challenges come cloaked in injustice or betrayal. But you have a choice: will you let those moments define you, or will you rise, find your strength, and fight back with everything you've got? Remember, courage isn't about never falling, it's about rising every time you do. When the world says you don't belong, prove that your place is exactly where you stand. So the next time you see someone being pushed out or silenced, think of General Cole and those 6 SEALs who refused to let injustice win. Stand up. Speak out. Because every voice matters, and sometimes, all it takes is one person to change everything. That's the real power of courage, and that's the lesson we carry forward from this story. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Remember, standing up for what's right isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. Subscribe for more stories that inspire courage, justice, and hope. And always believe in yourself, because your voice has the power to change the world. Thank you for watching, stay strong, stay kind, and keep fighting for what's right. Until next time.